This movie time is brought to you by the Gateway Film Center, 1550 North High Street, Columbus, Ohio. Further details and showtimes online at gatewayfilmcenter.org.
It's Movie Time is produced by John DeSando. Listen to the shows and read reviews online at WCBE.org.
I'm John DeSando.
And I'm Linda Baas McClelland.
And this is It's Movie Time. Linda, the film today is The Birth of a Nation. This is not the D.W. Griffith 1915 epic.
Right, about the rise of the Ku Klux Klan.
Right, in which it exalts the Ku Klux Klan. Why is this film by Nate Parker important, do you think?
Well, in light of current events, it's very important, but it is a disturbingly brutal film about the 1831 slave rebellion led by Nat Turner. I kept getting the names mixed up.
Well,
Nate,
sure.
Nat. But Nate Parker, he wrote the film, he directed it, and he stars in it. So it's important from that standpoint, too. But I got to tell you, this movie gave me bad dreams. It was pretty brutal at times.
Similar to 12 Years a Slave,
Which
do you
was
think?
but I think that movie was a little bit better than this one, which we'll get into in a little bit. But as a little boy, Nat Turner was seen by an African shaman to be a spiritual leader. And his spirituality is encouraged by his owner's wife, who teaches him to read the Bible. And he becomes a Baptist preacher to his fellow slaves.
Yeah, manipulated by the whites.
Exactly.
To make the slaves more compliant
Exactly.
to the whites' wishes. So kind of twisting the Bible to show them to be,
Right.
to encourage them to be.
He tries to
subservient.
calm them by teaching lessons
Go ahead.
They hope by hearing the word of God, they'll encourage them to turn the other cheek when faced with the cruelties they endure daily.
Right. And you're going to have to go through the whipping scene again, as you did in 12 Years a Slave.
Oh, yes. Several times, yes.
And I think it does it less than in 12 Years a Slave. So I don't think you're subjected to a lengthy bout of this. But apparently, this is what happened. And this is really pre-Civil War.
Right.
I'm interested in his Nat Turner's relationship with his owner, played by played by Armie Hammer.
Right.
And that one of the nuances of the film. This is not would you agree? This is not a nuanced film.
No, it's not.
Kind of hits you over the head.
Yeah, he hits emotional notes with a hammer, I think.
Yes. And so initially it's a pretty decent relationship between slave and owner.
Right.
And Hammer does a great job. I mean, I didn't think he was worth anything in The Lone Ranger, but here he does the job of a conflicted slave owner.
Yeah, he's very conflicted, and he's trying to make money, which he needs badly, by loaning Nat out to preach to these other slaves. But the whole plan sort of backfires. Nat notices that the owners of the slaves aren't even listening to the words that he's preaching, and by traveling to all these other plantations, he is a witness to these dreadful, dreadful things that these slaves must endure. So his preaching begins to turn away from acceptance and peace, and he starts to bring the word of the Lord, and as a sword, it becomes a weapon.
Yeah, and I think Nate Parker, both as actor and then as director and part writer of this,
Right.
has done a pretty terrific job in making you identify with this man who is himself conflicted. And that conflict, to me, is a conflict of the film. How do you face down racism of the most brutal kind? How do you face down racism of the most brutal kind? How do you do that? And there's where I think his struggle came until he became the head of a rebellion.
Right. And part of the movie, he is shot from below, surrounded by light, and it's almost like he starts to be seen as a savior figure for these slaves.
Yeah.
And then it starts to get extremely violent. and which leads
Yeah.
to this rebellion.
In that rebellion, they were responsible for killing at least 60 whites.
Right, and the slaughter of 200 blacks.
Wow, including Turner himself.
Right.
And as we look at that, I'm so reminded, say, of Watts and of other places, for instance, in the 60s, where racism reached that critical point where it became ultra-violent.
Right.
And that worries me about this film.
Yes.
Does it you at all?
Yes, it's a very relevant film, whether it's good or bad, but in light of all the things that are going on and that we see on television and in our streets and in our city council chambers, it's very relevant, and it is kind of frightening.
And no question about it. It is a veiled comment on police brutality,
Definitely.
which has become a very important subject in our time, and it is resolved in a massacre. And eventually, of course, slaves will be freed, which is what Nat Turner wanted. So you could say that eventually it works. This rebellion works. But how it works as a matter of violence is that which I think is at the heart of the film.
Right.
Now, are there any soft parts of this film? I mean, is it all brutal?
It has its sweet moments with Nat and his wife.
Yes.
But it's hard to condemn or praise this movie. There are good parts and there are bad parts.
Bad, you mean violent?
Bad, violent, and then some things that I think are some of the characters are extremely stereotypical, like the evil slave masters. And I think a lot of the dialogue is very trite.
Okay.
And some of the imagery is quite beautiful, and the cinematography is good.
Yeah, there are some, such as one that you had mentioned, become almost ethereal. Some of them
Right.
try to elevate this
Like
into a
the
very
butterfly landing on the swinging corpse of the slave. But then there are other images that he uses of an angel that keeps reappearing, it doesn't work for me.
I'll tell you what works for me. There's one shot where where Parker has the camera pulling back, and you see all of the hanged men on
Yes.
trees. This is a really powerful image. I don't think I've ever seen anything
Right.
quite as arresting as that. When it tracks back, and you begin to see one or two bodies hanging, and then you pull back to a whole raft of them on each side. That is really a powerful one. But yes, I agree. Some of the others are like a film student
Right, exactly.
trying to do some arty shots.
Right. But Nate,
Hold on. Thank you. Okay.
okay, but Nate Parker, I think, does a really good job of acting. His dialogues are well delivered.
Yes, he is.
And I think that's one of the best parts of the film. He's a better actor than he is a director, in my mind.
Now, Linda, we wouldn't be responsible NPR commentators unless we mentioned that there is outside of this film a whole problem area related to
Right.
Nate Parker and his past.
I wondered if you were going to bring that
Well,
up.
I just that we can't be, that is a part of this as a work of art,
Right.
and I'm not trying to bring that in because I don't think you should do that, generally speaking, nor should you compare this to 12 Years a Slave extensively. It is a work of art of its own, and as a work of art, I hesitate to mention what Nate Parker brings into it, but I don't know. Can you do it? Can you do the controversy justice without giving your own opinion?
It's very hard to do, and I think before the controversy came to light, after the Sundance Film Festival, this film was offered $17 million, which was a record.
Fox
breaker, I think.
Searchlight, 17 and a half
And
million
then the
dollars.
controversy behind Nate and the co-writer came out, and then it almost becomes more important than the film. And the movie was on 60 Minutes this Sunday night.
There was an interview with Nate Parker.
Right, and instead of really talking about the movie, they were talking more about the controversy.
Well, yes, and that was Anderson Cooper, I think, wasn't
Yes,
it?
yeah.
Interviewing Parker. And Parker was accused of rape, along with his co-writer.
Right.
At that time, they were just students at Penn State.
Right.
And they were exonerated. I mean, even the partner did go to jail, but was actually released. So the world seems to be trying Nate Parker again for something for which he has been exonerated. And there, I think, is the problem with bringing something outside of the work of art into the work of art.
Mm-hmm.
But it is incredibly ironic, is it not?
I find
You
it
know what
very
I'm thinking?
ironic that some of the most brutal scenes in the movie were the rapes of slave women by their owners, and then we find out what he was accused of. And the co-writer was also involved in this
incident.
Yeah. And he was not acquitted. And I think the sad thing about the dreadfully sad, and they talked about this on 60 Minutes, is the girl who had accused them later committed suicide in 2012.
Yeah.
So you don't know how much to talk about this. I'm very conflicted about it.
And there's a point, he was actually acquitted even after he spent time.
Yeah.
That is the other fellow in the rape
Right.
allegations was eventually exonerated, and that's where I begin to feel I'm being unjust to Nate Parker and to his film by bringing that up. But we have to be responsible and say, look, if this is there, and if you see in its opening week, and it's opening today,
Yes.
if you see a very low take at the box office, it's possible because there are people who are boycotting this film because of the circumstances.
That could be very true.
Yes,
yes.
right, and that would be sad because it is a good film.
Yes.
But Linda Baas McClelland, the movie is. Oh yeah. Now, all right. Linda Baas McClelland, the movie is The Birth of a Nation. What grade would you award it? What do you mean,
Again, I'm very conflicted about it,
I
and
can tell.
that's before the controversy came out. Clearly, we are still dealing with issues of inequality in our life, which
Yes.
makes this movie very relevant.
Yes.
But I think that as a film, it has big faults.
All right.
So I'm going to give it a C+.
All right. All right. Well, that is a strong both condemnation and affirmation of the film. So I
Yes.
admire it. And I'll have to award it a B for some of the reasons that you just talked about. It is terribly relevant. He does a great job acting, and he has a strong supporting cast. But for me, it doesn't go beyond a B.
Okay.
But anyway, if you want to be on top of the current cultural scene,
Right.
you might want to see
Mm-hmm.
The Birth of a Nation.
Birth of a Nation. Someday we shall overcome.
Yeah.